Good evening and welcome to the ASEA Genesis call. I'm so delighted that you would join us this evening. My name is Karen Riley. I'm the Regional Vice President of Sales for the United States here at ASEA. I'll be hosting with you this evening. I wanted to first start out by thanking all of our associates who have joined us on this call and give a very special thank you to the new visitors that might be joining us for the first time. Hearing a little bit more about the ASEA Genesis will certainly help you understand who we are as a company and where we came from and where we're going. I've been at the company for just over 6 years, and I am never been so excited to be involved with a company who is so deeply passionate about our mission here, which is to better people's lives and to be a force for good in the world. We have a very strong commitment to our vision, which is to become the global recognized leader in cellular health and redox-based technologies and offer our incredible products, opportunity, and culture to the world. We have a deep commitment to fulfilling on that vision and mission through our core values, and we have 7 of those: humanity, authenticity, sustainability, performance, growth, resolve, and collaboration. What you're about to hear tonight and who you're going to hear from tonight, I know will be an inspiration for you making a decision to join us. I'm excited to be sharing and introducing our founder and chairman. He's going to walk you through his personal journey on how this company got started and where we're going. Tyler, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Hey, Karen, thanks so much. And hello to everybody out there. Thanks so much for joining us on this call tonight. I'm thrilled to be able to share the ASEA Genesis with all of you. And I wanted to start, Karen, if I could, just by saying, if you're on this call tonight and if you're being exposed to or introduced to ASEA for the first time, I want to tell you that you're here for a reason. I genuinely believe that. I believe that you've been led to this opportunity for reasons beyond maybe what you're even calculating or determining now. And I want to congratulate you for joining us tonight and hope that my sharing of this story with you and a little bit more about who we are as a company will touch your heart and help you to consider how you might get involved in this great cause and mission. I'd like to just take a brief overview of what I plan to discuss with you today and this evening. And I'm aiming to have this be about a 30 to 40-minute call from a time management perspective, just for your information. And the overview that I'd like to take you through today is as follows. There's 3 founders of ASEA, and I'm going to focus tonight on 2 of them, my dad and myself. And I'd like to walk you through a little bit of our experience, father and son, and our backgrounds and how we got here. I think you'll find that my dad's background is a very unique one in this industry. And I'd like to start there. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, not a ton, a little bit more in detail with my dad. But I want you to get a sense as to how both his background and my background led us to finding the technology, which is the 3rd bullet point here. And then I'd like to share personally kind of my own experience with ASEA, kind of my own personal journey, if you will. And I'll wrap the call by just giving you a real brief update on where we stand today. And again, we designed this whole experience to be for those individuals that would like to get a little bit better understanding as to how this company started, who we are, and what it is that we're trying to accomplish throughout the world. So once again, I want to thank those of you that are here for the first time especially, and welcome you to this Genesis call tonight. So let's jump into it. I want to first talk about our founder, Norton. To understand where this company started, you have to kind of understand my dad's background. I should start with his name. We have a good joke about my dad's name. We were told in our family that if any of us named any of our children after him, that we would be disowned. We laugh about it. I've had people ask if my dad's from all over the world. My dad is not. My dad is from Utah, and he was named Vertus. And we jokingly remember a story of him being 18 wanting to change his name to Curtis. So sometimes we'll call him Curtis. But my dad, Vertus, is an amazing man who's accomplished a great deal in his life. And it's hard to tell the ASEA story without taking some time to talk about his background and where he comes from. So my dad basically put himself through college working at Safeway Stores, which is a grocery store chain, if you're familiar, I think largely found out here in the West, here in Salt Lake City. And he paid for his own university experience. put himself through school, working 60 to 70 hours a week as a store manager there. And then having got a BS degree in accounting from the University of Utah, was quickly named to store management, and ran some of the best stores in that Safeway region. In fact, became one of the store leaders that was used to kind of train and develop other store managers, because he was running the store well. And this is relevant because my dad's experience started with a love of the grocery industry and a love of that whole arena in business. And that naturally led him, after several years working for Safeway, he took a job working with General Foods. At the time, General Foods was one of the largest food manufacturing enterprises in the world, definitely in the United States. And my father spent the better part of 15 years in 10 distinct and different jobs, ultimately getting to the point where he was the sales manager over a I think it was a $1.1 billion division, the beverage division at General Foods. And this was a series of, if you think about it, 15 years, 10 distinct jobs. He would tell me that they would put you into a job and keep you there just long enough for you to gain the experience you needed, and then they'd move you to another job. And it was part of a rotating kind of leadership development experience. And if you thrived in that environment, they kept you there and kept pushing you through new jobs. And so you might imagine, this is between my dad's ages of roughly 30 to 45. He gained some remarkable experience running various jobs at General Foods, but ultimately leading up the sales side of a $1 billion division. They're one of their largest divisions, which was the beverage side. For a season, at the tail end of that beverage experience, he was also asked to get into the food service space for General Foods. And that was a bridge to him being recruited away. These are some quick pictures of him during that era at General Foods. And he was then recruited away to a company called Hobart. In fact, I'll never forget when he came home from work and said, we're moving from Connecticut, which is where we'd spent the better part of the last 10 years. And he said, we're moving to Ohio, of all places. And at the time, I wasn't too terribly excited about it. I was a freshman in high school. My two older brothers and older sister, my sister Nancy, was just finishing up high school. My two older brothers were already outside the home at the university. And my dad came home and said, we're moving to Ohio, which none of us were anticipating at all. And that was the beginnings of him running an organization called Hobart Corporation. Now, Hobart, many of you may have seen this brand on the screen here. He spent the better part of 5 years there. They were a $500 million company. And he was brought in originally as a VP of sales and service, and then ultimately went on to run the company as the executive vice president. And this was a pivot from the food industry and now into the food service space. And I think I've got a few pictures here. If you know anything about Hobart, Hobart is one of the largest manufacturers of world-class commercial food equipment. And whether that's slicers or scales, you can go to almost any grocery store in America and probably hunt down a piece of Hobart equipment. And for my dad, it was a unique opportunity to move from sales leadership, which he had largely been doing at General Foods, and get into general management, P&L management, and understanding all sides of the business. And this was an important developmental time in his life. Surprisingly to him, General Foods and Kraft were merged together. And he was invited to return back to Kraft Foods, which had again merged with General Foods. He knew many of the leaders at Kraft because of his 15 years at General Foods. And he was brought up to head up over 7 years spent there, a $1.5 billion division called the Channel Group. And Channel Group was a whole series of different smaller businesses at Kraft that he ended up managing and working on as a conglomerate. This included convenience store sales, sales of their products to the military, even some geographic kind of places that were difficult geographically to manage: Puerto Rico, Alaska, Hawaii, Mexico. And then just as club stores like Costco and Sam's Club were coming online, my dad was asked to oversee all of the sale of Kraft products into those club stores. So this was a remarkable run of experience with some of the most well-known brands in the world. And my dad ran that division very distinctly from the rest of the company. Kraft at the time was a $35 to $36 billion enterprise. And he was asked to come in and run this channel group, and was given some liberties and frankly took some risks that kind of set his performance apart. And they brought in the Harvard Business Review. They wanted to understand what it was that he was doing differently than the rest of the company. And as it turned out, they took many of the practices that my dad was using for his division and spread those across the entire enterprise over time. That led to him being promoted to the vice president of strategy of Kraft Foods, reporting directly to the CEO at the time. And if you can imagine running strategy for a $36 billion worldwide enterprise, my dad had a remarkable experience there. One of his assignments on the strategy side was entitled Efficient Consumer Response, and he was responsible for taking all the wasted motion out of the supply chain of food, getting all the way down to the actual stores in a more efficient way, and took Kraft from being 10th in ECR rankings across the world to being first. Now, surprisingly, he got to this particular point. He's in his mid-50s, and Kraft came out with an early retirement opportunity. And my father gave serious consideration to this with my mom. He was around 57 years old and thought, wow, we've got an opportunity to retire. They were offering a few extra years of service if you took the early retirement package. And they both deliberated on it. And when he went into the office the next day and said, hey, I'm going to take the early retirement package. And they said, no, you're not. And they asked him to stay longer. He was invited to stay maybe a year or two longer and finish up some of these initiatives he was working on. They honored the retirement package downstream, and ultimately he retired to Park City, Utah, which is where our family was originally from, was the Salt Lake City area. He and my mom were excited to make a change. They'd been on the East Coast and in Chicago, came out to the mountains, designed and built the home of their dreams up in the aspen trees of Park City. And for the first time, really, since we were younger kids, our whole family was able to gather together at mom and dad's house on Sundays for dinners. Here's a picture of us during that era of time. This was a real joyful time for us to have our dad back close to us and actually consider the fact that he might retire, which I will tell you was not the case. But he did for a while, and we had a lot of fun with him during this era. Now, I need to step back for just a minute and give you a little context, some backstory here before I move forward with his experience. During his time at General Foods, as well as his time at Kraft, he had the privilege of working the better part of 22 years with a gentleman by the name of James Kiltz. James and my dad met when they were both young executives at General Foods, and both worked together in the beverage division for many years. In fact, my dad and Jim developed the product Crystal Light together, which I believe probably many of you have heard of. And my dad had the really good fortune of his association with Jim. I think my dad would tell you that Jim is one of the great mentors he's ever had in his entire life. Just to give you an idea of who Jim Kiltz is, you may not have heard much about him, but Jim was the CEO of Kraft Foods, as I mentioned, but also of Oscar Mayer, also of Nabisco, and his swan song was being the CEO of Gillette. And I should say parenthetically that when he became the CEO of Gillette, he was the first outside member of that organization, that family, in I think over 70 years to take over as the CEO. And my dad spent 22 years working with Jim Kiltz together and learned a great deal from him. You might find it interesting to note that I researched over 7 CEOs of large companies like Campbell Soup, Kraft, Nabisco, Hershey's, a couple of others, Mattel was one, all worked for and under Jim Kiltz at one time or another. So if you can imagine the benefit my dad got of working with Jim for the better part of 22 years. When Jim was brought in to run Gillette, he was brought in as CEO by none other than Warren Buffett. And those of you that know anything about the investment community know that Warren Buffett is widely recognized as one of the greatest investors and business minds of our day. This is what Warren Buffett had to say of Jim Kiltz. And he told this in an interview with Fortune magazine that he had turned around Nabisco prior to coming Gillette. And when Kiltz met with Buffett for the first time, Warren said that he made as much sense in terms of talking about business in general as anybody that he had ever talked to. I've since heard Warren refer to Jim as one of the greatest CEOs of all time in American history. And Jim says of my dad, having worked with him for over 20 years, that my dad had a very unique ability to simplify complex situations and think very strategically. And I tell you that because when my father retired and moved out to Park City, he began to codify and actually slow down and think back on all of the process steps that he had used to manage various divisions and ultimately strategy for Kraft Foods. And he organized all of that into a model that we now refer to as strategic link. And strategic link is a very interesting kind of organization and structure of all of these years of experience of working with Jim Kiltz. It's a practical approach to planning and execution. And it really became my dad's core methodology for how he would attack any business opportunity that he was given. It had 4 quadrants where you looked at the playing field. In the second quadrant, you spent some time introspecting through significant disciplines. Third, you said, what do we plan to do about it? And fourth was this very detailed approach to priorities and execution. And Dad spent some time and then broke this down into individual 12 steps. So each of those quadrants have 3 steps. And this particular process became really central to the genesis of ASEA. And I'm telling you this because I want you to understand his background in designing and building businesses, whether that was small businesses early in his career all the way to Fortune 50 companies. These are all process steps that he's forced us to use here at ASEA along the way. Now, that strategic link process really became the next chapter in my dad's career because he retired from Chicago and from Kraft Foods. And after a brief stint doing some service for our church, was invited to actually head up a biotech company that was a joint venture owned between National Beef and DMV out of the Netherlands. And this was a particularly interesting shift in my dad's life because it pushed him into the biotechnology space, which I think is an important reference point for what we're doing here to see it now. And it was this strategic link process that in this case, the president of Farmland National Beef saw my dad and heard him talk about this and said, I really want your help with this subsidiary biotech that we're running. And so retired for a season of time. I think my mom was happy to see him go back to work, and he put himself back in a position where he was learning a whole new industry in the biotech space. At this particular point, it might be good to pivot and just tell you a little bit about my background and then how these two stories converge. I also went to the University of Utah. Oh, I should back up and tell you a little bit about my family first. Sorry about that. I am a father of 6 children, a rarity, I've decided. I go around the world and there's very few people that have as many kids as I do. I have 5 beautiful boys and 1 princess of a daughter, and married the girl of my dreams, who continues to be the girl of my dreams, Allison. And I share this with you to let you know that we're very family oriented here at ASEA, and it's an important part of who we are, not only as individuals, but as a company. And I was the youngest of my dad's 4 children. This is a picture that I couldn't resist putting up for my brothers and sisters with the 70s clothes. Looks like a clip from the Brady Bunch. But I'm the youngest one on the bottom right there at that family picture. And I had the benefit, being the youngest, of spending a fair amount of time with my dad over the years. This is a picture of me in my early teens with my dad. And my dad and I have a very, very close relationship. And my background and experience will kind of converge with my dad's, you'll see here on this timeline. So as I mentioned, I went to the University of Utah. I took a job in the financial services industry with the New York domiciled insurance carrier, Mutual of New York, or Money as it's referred to back east. And I spent 7 years there. I was a financial advisor at a retail level, then asked to build a team of my own. I built the #1 team in the country at Mutual of New York. I was then promoted to a national director in my late 20s, much earlier than I should have been. And I went to my dad at this time and asked him to start teaching me some of the principles that he was applying in his very successful career. And I tell you that because it's this strategic link process that he began to teach to me. And once I started to master the principles and how to apply that to business, I was promoted to the youngest general manager over a state, in this case, Arizona. I moved to Phoenix. And then shortly thereafter, within 2 years, I was recruited away by a regional company in Salt Lake City to be the vice president over, at the time, about 80% of their revenue. From there, I went to become a senior vice president, and then ultimately what they call a chief distribution officer in the insurance and investment industry. And I want to pause here and just draw attention to the fact that my father had taught me this strategic link process, and I was applying those same 12 steps to every single job that I had along the way. And every time I applied it with a certain degree of discipline and intensity, the result of the business always, always followed. And that's an important thing for me to reference as I take you through the story. I should tell you that I took a opportunity to take some of the distribution from this beneficial company and sold it to a Goldman Sachs and Blackstone private equity portfolio company called InSphere, and I spent roughly 1 year on contract with them, and then saw the unique opportunity to step out and do consulting work for the strategic link process. And so that's kind of a little bit about my background. Now, how did we find this technology? Well, my dad's background and experience converged with my background and experience because we were given an opportunity to do a strategic link consulting engagement with a small biotech company that ultimately led to this product. I think it's probably one of the most unique stories of how a network marketing company has started, because neither he nor I were thinking about that at the time. We were both just doing some advisory work and bumped into this technology along the way. And just to give you a sense, when I was working at Beneficial during this window on my experience, I shared the strategic link process with some of our top producers there. One producer in particular took it very seriously and did very well applying the principles in his boutique investment firm, and called me on the phone and said, hey, would you help a company that I've invested in with strategy in the strategic planning process? And at that particular time, he told me it was a biotech company in northern Utah, and that they were developing 2 core products. Now remember, my father at this time is finishing up his assignment running a biotech company. He is the author of the strategic link processes, and it occurred to me that he might be interested in doing a consulting engagement with me. And so as luck would have it, we met with this organization, and we actually did this consulting process that my dad had used for so many years. It was an organization referred to me by a friend. It was a biotech company up in northern Utah, and they had spent more than 10 years and millions of dollars investing in the processes for development, research, and patents on 2 products that they were going to ultimately sell into the pharmaceutical industry. And they have one very intriguing product that was made from salt and water. And my father was very curious about this product as he got closer to it, and I'll tell you about that. Ultimately, Dad was asked to sit on the board of this company. And before he was willing to accept the opportunity to sit on the board, he said, you're going to have to prove to me that this is not snake oil, that there's something to particularly this salt and water product. And so they brought him a box of research, and they brought over their patent portfolio, and they laid it all out before him. And remember, he had just finished running a biotech company for the better part of 4 or 5 years. He had a lab in Southern California with several PhDs working there, and a grouping of master's or graduate students as well working in this lab. And he knew how to read and understand research. And this was pivotal. If my dad had not taken that opportunity, I don't know that we would have ASEA today as we know it. But because he was able to understand the research, he found himself reading research from some of the great institutions in America, some of the great universities, UCLA, Harvard, Indiana University, and a host of others. He was calling some of the top biotech and labs across the country. And every time he spoke with someone about this research, they were very positive. Not only was he reading the summaries, but he was speaking to the actual lead scientists, and they were saying this is a very unique product, and that the outcomes of the research were things that they would never have imagined. And I think that spurred for my dad a real deep curiosity about what this product was all about. Now, I should tell you that my dad ended up continuing to stay close to this company. I was at the tail end of my professional career in the financial services industry, and so he was running point on all of this while I was still going to work each day in my prior life. And it really is an interesting story as to how this all played out, because that biotech experience of my dad led him to really start digging in and doing more and more research, and really trying to understand what it was that they had. In fact, I remember going to the house the very first time after meeting with the CEO and CFO together, he said, Tyler, they have something here, but I'm not sure they know what they have. There's something very significant with this research. It's counterintuitive because it's made simply from salt and water and a process that they're putting it through. But look at the research. And he began showing me research after research and summary and data sets that were actually suggesting some properties that were very difficult to almost believe. And I have to be honest with you, knowing that it was made from salt and water, I found myself almost not believing. And I really had doubt that it was what my dad was believing and starting to say that it was. I left my dad's home this particular day when he had books scattered all over his library. And I kind of got in the car and thought, my dad's had this remarkable career. It may well be that the last chapter in his book may not be the most successful of all the chapters, but the book itself will be great. And I giggle thinking about that now, knowing how quickly ASEA has spread across the globe. But at the time, it was hard for me to get my hands around. And it didn't help much that, the next time I came by my parents' home, I said hello to my mom. I gave her a kiss. I said, "Hey, where's Dad?" And he was downstairs in the basement. And as I came downstairs in the basement, I saw this very device that you're looking at here in this picture and several mason jars filled with this clear fluid. Now, if you're from the South, a mason jar with a clear fluid is quickly recognized as moonshine. And we joked and laughed with my dad saying, "What is this stuff? What are you doing down here?" And in fact, I used to joke with my dad early on that he reminded me of the movie Back to the Future, the mad scientist and the flux capacitor, because he had this device in our basement. No one knew exactly what it was. You can see it had voltage meters and amp meters, and it had all these different wires coming out of it. And it just seemed so strange. And yet my dad has been so successful in his life, I knew that he wouldn't be spending time on it unless there was something to it. So it was an interesting time for us as a family. And we affectionately referred to this moonshine as the stuff. I mean, it had no name. It wasn't named ASEA. It wasn't in a beautiful bottle. It's just the stuff. And it didn't help. I have to tell you, this has become kind of folklore at ASEA. But you can see this arrow on the screen here pointing right to the machine. And this is a true story. This actual machine was the one he had on the counter in the basement. And right there on the front of it, it said in big letters, "jewelry cleaner." And I remember laughing with my dad as he tried to get me to drink this product. That I said, "You have to explain why it says jewelry cleaner." And we laughed about it. And as it stands, that they were sending one of these devices overseas, and they didn't want anyone at customs to be alarmed by the nature of it. So they simply wrote it was a jewelry cleaner on the outside, almost a head fake, trying to get people to think that it was something else. And so you can imagine the source credibility issue I had. Here's my dad, very successful, very, very good career, retired, but understands biotech. And now he's got this jewelry cleaner and this mason jar and this stuff. It was not an easy thing to get your hands around. And maybe some of you are still saying that today. But I had to go through my own ASEA genesis. I had to have my own series of experiences. And I'd like to pivot at this point and just walk you through how it is that I came to my own convictions about what it is that we're doing here. And for me, it all started at church, actually. We were at a church meeting talking and discussing the members of our congregation and their needs. And on this particular Sunday, the leader of our congregation, who is a neighbor of mine and a dear friend, came in, and I could tell that he was heavy-hearted this day in this meeting. And he said, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news. One of our neighbors is really struggling and has been struggling for several months with a challenge. And he's pretty much run all of the different options that he's had and is being told that he just needs to enjoy the time that he has and that this challenge is going to have to run its course." And I remember distinctly sitting in this meeting and pondering and thinking about my own little family. Now, this friend of mine was a neighbor, contemporary to me in age. His children were similar to mine in terms of age. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're trying to make sense of a challenge that someone has. You're trying to piece it all together. And you start thinking about your own family, and you feel so almost helpless. You want to help. You don't know how to help. And the challenge seems so large that you just almost can't get your hands around it. I don't remember anything else that was said that day at church. I just remember going home. I remember distinctly my wife saying, "You seem troubled about something. What's the matter?" And I told her about what was happening with this particular friend. His name was Jason. And we sat in my office, and I remember distinctly both of us saying, what could we do to help him and help his family? And every idea that we had just seemed so small. It seemed so insignificant, whether that was something as simple as let's take over dinner to their family and let's provide a meal for them. We talked about the possibility of taking the kids so he and his wife could have a weekend together. And you can imagine all of a sudden what pops into my mind is the stuff. I remembered the flux capacitor. I remembered my dad. And I thought to myself, I wonder if my dad would think that this might be able to help him with his situation. And so the fact is, I reached out to my dad. I told him about the situation and asked if he thought the stuff would be of some help to my neighbor. Now, I need to be fair and tell you my exact feelings at the time. And I use a little bubble graphic here to show this. I was in a place of fear, and it was closely tied and aligned with a place of doubt. And I believe those are two kissing cousins. I was fearful that whatever this product was would maybe cause things to get worse for him. How was anyone to know that it wasn't going to exacerbate a problem? Would it be okay with whatever other things they were administering to him to help him with this challenge? There were a lot of questions I had. And it was a mixture of fear and then just doubt in general. How can a saltwater derivative product be additive or helpful to anyone, really? And so when I called my dad, I was in this disposition of these two circles of fear and doubt. And it was real for me. I was very concerned about telling them what this was or where it came from, much less wanting to suggest anything about the outcome. But I had such great confidence in my dad and all of his life experiences and all of his successes. In some way, I was kind of riding on his tails a little bit, coattails a little bit, and saying, if you believe in this, maybe I should share this with my friend. And so, in fact, he convinced me that particular day that there was enough to the stuff that he would, in fact, make some for me. And he made, as it turned out, a 5-gallon almost camping jug of this size. And I took it down to my neighbor. Now, I should tell you the truth. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this. I was so concerned about their response that I decided I was not going to be the one that gave it to my friend Jason. I went to the other neighbor who was a leader of our church. His name was Craig. And I said, Craig, I need you to take this to Jason and tell him that it might help him. And I distinctly remember him saying, well, what is it? And me saying back to him, I don't know. I can't tell you exactly what it is, nor do I want you to tell Jason where it came from. So he was like, well, let me get this straight. You have a product, you don't know what it is. You don't want me to tell him where it came from, and you don't want to give it to him. And I said, exactly right. And he said, well, why should I do it? And I said, because you're the leader of the church and you're supposed to help people. And so we had a good laugh about it. And to Craig's everlasting credit, he actually said, yeah, I'll take it to him. And even more miraculous to me than just Craig's being willing to walk this across the street to Jason's home was the fact that Jason actually drank it. And I've stopped many times to ponder on it. If someone came to my home and I was in the same situation and suggested to me that someone who they couldn't tell me had brought them a product that they couldn't tell me what it is or was, and suggested that I drink it to help me, I just don't think that I would have had the courage or faith. Maybe he was to a place where he thought he had nothing to lose in doing so. But it's just always been so fascinating to me that he was willing to do that. Well, at this particular time, you can imagine that I'm still in fear and doubt and very much concerned about what this product can do. And my dad was still continuing his investigation and ultimately got to a place where he rounded out this timeline by going out and putting a group together to purchase all this research and patents. Now, the backstory there is that the parent company was struggling financially. They asked my dad to help them raise some funds. They went out to do that, but they had fouled up their capital table. They were having a hard time bringing in additional dollars. And my father told the then chairman I'd be very interested in buying the patents and research, which he was able to do. And that's ultimately what led us to ASEA. Now, there was an interesting interval during this window. This product had been to my neighbor's friend, and my dad was working with several people, and they started to throw out concepts like redox signaling, which we now know is what's happening with this product. These molecules are actually communicating. This notion of cellular communication was starting to be discussed. And you have to understand, I don't purport to come from a science background, so it was still the stuff to me. And I was trying to make sense of, okay, what's really happening here? Why is this product so intriguing to my dad and to others? And it was because they were starting to realize that there was redox biochemistry. This is when I started to understand that the better part of 60-70% of my body weight is salt and water, that all of the trillions of chemical reactions that happen in a body that combine to make your metabolism are happening in an environment of salt and water. And I went to lunch with one of the scientists that was there at the early stage of the business. And I went almost to protect my dad a little bit. At this time, I'm still in fear and doubt. My dad had a very unique opportunity and a very significant kind of challenge, if you will. He had to decide whether or not he was going to sell or not sell these patents and this research, and had a very distinct opportunity. If you've seen the Genesis video from a few years back, it tells the story in detail that my dad had an opportunity to sell it to a large pharma company that was anxious in continuing the research. By then, he had shared the product with so many different people and was so confident of what it could do and what it represented that this became a real moral dilemma for him. And they deliberated after receiving an informal offer to move forward with another company. And they spent the better part of an evening really thinking about what they should do. And they all felt like this product deserved to be in the hands of people sooner and faster. And as a result of that, they chose not to sell. And I appreciate knowing that about my dad. Now, I should tell you a little bit more about my friend Jason. About this time, I received a phone call back from Craig, the church leader, and Craig made it clear to me that Jason had, in fact, had a fairly significant product experience with this product, and that he was improving. And I distinctly remember this conversation with Craig where I said, "Are you going to tell me that, he's certain that this has been helping him?" And he says, "Well, I'm calling to tell you that he's out of the stuff and looking to find out where he can get more. He's completely convinced that this product has helped him start to improve." I was so incredulous at the time that I actually reached out to Jason, and embarrassingly, I said to him, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm the one that gave the stuff to Craig. I was nervous. He's telling me that you're starting to have an experience that's positive. Can you fill in the blanks for me?" And I even went so far as to invite Jason and his wife to my home. And I set up a video camera because I really wanted to capture what their experience had been with the product. And I did that. And I got to tell you that for me, this became a very important experience and an important time in my life. I would not be involved with this company if had it not been for this experience. And let me explain why to you this way. When you stop and consider this notion of what if, when you really stop and think about the power of what if something like this is really true? What if there are real molecules that can communicate at a cellular level, that can accelerate the process of determining whether a cell is damaged and needs to be repaired, or even if a cell needs to be replaced? What would the implications be if you could increase the volume and the amount of these molecules that could communicate all throughout your body? Think about the cellular implications. Every organ in your body, every part of your body is in fact made up of cells. Those cells have very common characteristics in many regards. They all communicate with each other. And what if, this became my first what if experience with the ASEA product. And going back to my little doubt and fear map, I found myself playing a game of ping pong between the blue and the red. Because when I spoke with Jason, my neighbor, about his experience, he started to share with me very specific and unique things that this product had done for him. And in those moments, I would go to a place of hope. I would say, can you imagine? What if what he's telling me is true? What if I could do this for more than one person? What if my dad's right? What if this research is real? What if we could get this to more people around the world? And then I would immediately revert back to a place of doubt. I would say, well, how do you know for sure? How can anyone know for sure? Your mind is a pharmacy. It can play games on you. You can choose to believe something and then have it actually play out. And I went back and forth forth. I was not like a linear process from fear and doubt all the way to hope where I stayed there. I was back and forth. And if you stop and think about it, what is it that helps you to move from a place of doubt back and forth between hope? Well, for me, it was pretty simple. It's experience. And in the case of Jason, I was just one hash mark. It was just one experience that I had had. But it got to a point where I started to actually speak to groups of people. I started to help my dad build out the early stages of the company. And I would have more experiences. I'd have people come and talk to me about things. They'd tell me their story. I actually started traveling and helping my dad speak to groups of people that were interested in the product all across the United States. And invariably, at the end of these meetings, people would come up to me and say, can you take a message back to your dad? Or can I share a personal story with you? And each one of these beautiful stories, these were real people. This is not something make-believe. These were real people, real families, real individuals who were sharing very similar stories to me and with me as I had my own experience with my neighbor, Jason. And it got to the point where hope and experience started to play ping pong. Each experience that I was having was actually starting to fill me with more hope. And as this played out, it kind of took me to a whole new world as these experience hash marks continued to play out and fill. It led to a new location on this little map, and that is a place of belief. And this is a really interesting triangulation between hope, experience, and belief. If you stop and think about it, this applies to several different areas of life. And that is that when you can have enough experiences that inspire hope, and your hope can inspire experiences, those two things can also feed to a sense of confidence, conviction, and belief. And in my case, it kind of drew the stark line between the blue and the red. I started to have really clear sense of belief. And in some ways, this notion of hope and fear, or doubt and fear, started to fade. It started to almost disappear. And I was living in the blue. I was living between, wow, another experience that filled me with greater senses of hope. And all of those things were feeding into a belief. Now, you might guess the next stage on this is in fact action. If you believe something in your heart to be true, it precedes action. In fact, all meaningful action is preceded by a sense of belief and conviction that what you're about to do is good or is the right choice or way to use your time. And in my particular instance, this started to feed from belief and became this really powerful kind of interplay between all four of these things. Now, I do want to tell you before I walk through ASEA today that my friend Jason had a remarkable run using ASEA to overcome a host of challenges and problems that he had. And on several occasions, I would see him, this is not months, this is years after he had been told to enjoy himself and his family because no one could really figure out a way to help. And he would see me. He'd see me on the street, and he'd pull out a pouch of ASEA and he'd bump his heart. I'd see him at church functions and pull off to the side with him and see how he was doing. And for years, he shared with me that ASEA continued to make a meaningful difference in his life. And for me, that was the very first experience. ASEA today is very different than it was at that particular stage. Karen mentioned at the front end of this call that our mission is to better people's lives and to be a force for good in the world. We mean that. We're not asking anybody's opinion about that. We're very serious about living true to this noble purpose and reason for being. And our vision really is to become the recognized global leader in these kinds of technologies that are redox-based, that deal at the cellular level with cellular health. And we want to bring to the world both the unique product sets that we've developed around these kinds of technologies, but also the opportunity. And I could spend another hour talking about how the financial opportunity of sharing such a powerful product set with the world can literally change your financial life as well as changing your health and the lives of others like my friend Jason. In addition to that, we teach cultural principles here. We maintain the disposition that a corporation is a body, that the actual word corporeal or body means corporation, and they come from the same derivative. And if a corporation is a body, then we believe it should have a soul. And we try to teach our cultural principles to become the soul of the corporation. I will tell you that I have worked in corporations, very, very large ones, where they had no soul. They just became a financial P&L and a shell and a skeleton, and they lost the spirit of what they were trying to do. And from almost day one at this company, we have set out to say we want to be different in the sense that we want this to have a corporate soul. We want to do good in the world. We want to be good people, but we want to make a difference by bringing this product and opportunity to so many. And, if you really look at this schematic, this notion of kind of where you are, this is almost like a you are here map for you personally. Where are you on this process? You might have been invited this week by some close friend or a family member. You might have been kicking and screaming coming in. I get it. We get it. You're on this continuum somewhere. Maybe you're already into belief because of a personal experience, and that's driving you to action, saying, I need to share this. Maybe you're all the way ping-ponging between doubt and hope. You've had enough little experience that it's triggered this what if notion, but you're not entirely sure. But I believe it's safe to say that everybody has to go through this continuum if they really want to be successful in sharing ASEA. They have to get to a place where they believe that it can make a difference. And maybe just this quick overview of where we are today will foreshadow for you the fact that this is for real, that this has happened, it's happening around the world, and were this not a product that you could bank on, I don't believe these kinds of outcomes could occur. Start with the stuff. This stuff being made in 1 liter increments at a time, put in a mason jar, is now made in a 42,000 square foot facility where thousands and thousands of bottles of this product can be made in a single 10-hour shift. Where our corporate offices are in a very large corporate facility in Salt Lake City with north of 100 employees in just our 5-6 year short history. The product is now being sold, and this is one of my favorite things to say, in 26 different countries. You remember when I said my dad's last chapter in his book might not be the best chapter? He has said to me on several occasions that this has been the most amazing experience of his entire life, that out of all of his corporate experience up to this point, that starting this at age 69 has been the greatest experience of his life. And we've traveled the globe together with my mom, with our family, and with all of you and so many dear friends that we've made around the world from different cultures, different ways of life, different languages, different food. But the one common thing has been the humanity that we found around the world and the desire that people have to improve their current situation, both financially and with health. We now sell this product, the stuff, in 26 different countries around the globe. If I were to draw a curve of our growth in revenue, you might be interested to know that it just continues to climb year over year over year. And this also, to me, is a testament of the strength of the product, the culture, and just who we are as an opportunity for people around the world. Once people get what this is and have their own little hash marks like I have on the screen here, it changes everything. They awaken to a whole new opportunity to impact people for good and to bless their own lives financially. This is an interesting statistic. From the very beginning till now, we've sold over 9 million bottles of our Redox supplement product, and we've added products that are Redox core products. Our whole Renew Advanced skincare line, which is anchored to the Redox technology through the serum that we have. And then, of course, our Renew 28, which is a total body outside-in approach to getting this cellular communication to advance in the body. I will tell you, I've watched my dad from the beginning, and he uses all of these products every single day. I jokingly say that he does not eat Kraft macaroni and cheese every single day, but he does use these products every day and attributes a great deal of his lively kind of nature and his mental acuity and all the things that he enjoys still deep into his 70s to these incredible products that we all found, gosh, almost about 10 years ago or a little more. This is who we are today, and it's a remarkable opportunity for you to consider joining. Let me just say that my dad, this was my dad and our family at the convention a year ago last May when he formally retired. He's still very much active in an advisory role to the board. I'm in the capacity of chairman of the board of ASEA, and my dad and I speak literally daily about the business, but it's been a joy to watch he and my mom and our whole family get involved in this beautiful world of network marketing. And I do want to say that our field leadership in this company are some of the finest people I've ever known in my life. They have become family to us. And my dad has handed off the leadership to myself and a group of very, very capable executives. You met Karen tonight, who's on this page, but a host of others that are really quality people that marry up with our field leadership together to take ASEA to the world. So I want to thank you for taking a few minutes tonight, letting me share my interpretation of this whole story. And thank you so much for even giving this consideration. I want to finish kind of where I started, and that is, if you're on this call tonight for the first time, if you're considering getting involved with the ASEA, I just want to go on record and say you are here for reasons beyond your current comprehension. There are people who need you. There are people in your circle of influence who need this product, and there are reasons beyond even the activity of breadwinning that you're here. You're here to help people just like my neighbor friend Jason. I wish you the very best in your journey of deliberation and invite you to come join us in this wonderful cause. I promise you that if you get involved, it'll change your life for the better and make a difference in the world for you and for others. Thanks so much for letting me be with you tonight. And Karen, I'll turn the time back up to you to just close the call.
Thank you so much, Tyler. As you've just heard, Tyler and I want to give you an invitation to take a deeper look at ASEA. If you've just learned about the Genesis for the first time, I want to share my personal experience that 6.5 years ago, at the intersection of when this company was introduced to me, and I learned about the company, and I learned about the people behind the company. One of those core values from day one has been a deep commitment, and that is humanity. That people matter regardless of what they can do for us or the role that they can play. You've been invited to listen to this call tonight because someone thinks that this product, this opportunity, or this culture is a good fit for your life. You've expressed an interest and taken the time to listen a little bit deeper about who we are as a company. I invite you to get back to the person who invited you to this call tonight to get additional questions answered. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Have a great evening.